Hello, Ruby. Welcome to the podcast. It is such a delight to see you and to hear you again.
Oh, thank you, Anne. I know it's been far too long, so I am really looking forward to getting into all the nitty gritty that you're going to undoubtedly probe out of me.
Yes. So let's start this conversation. And we have, for anyone who enjoys this conversation, I'll preempt it by saying that you and I have had many conversations in public on Instagram, which I will link to in the show notes, around topics similar to those we're discussing today. And who knows where else we will go, because we always love a riff and it's never long enough, even if we spend an hour talking to each other. So let's dive in. The work that you do online, and the reason that you were an arresting figure for me when I first came across you was is different to other things that I see online. Because often when we're working online, we're seeing and learning and absorbing about how to do more, how to be more efficient, how to show up in more places, how to produce. And your message is one that is very different, and that at the time made me sit back, and still does. I was thinking as we were getting ready for this podcast around you controlling your use of social media instead of social media controlling you. And as a mother to two teens whose mental health I see fluctuating in direct connection to how much they're using their phones, and my own as well, it feels more urgent than ever for us to be having the conversations that you're starting. So can you talk a little bit about why you feel driven to do the work that you do, and how you came to this?
Yeah, what you've just described isn't uncommon in terms of that. A lot more parents recognizing in themselves and in their children that there is this direct correlation between the amount of time they're spending on digital devices, particularly their smartphones, and the way that they feel. I had a similar experience, which is how I came to the conclusion or the revelation that I wanted to be able to control social media, not the other way around. And I wanted that for my audience as well. So as I started my business around about 6 years ago, I, as you can imagine, within the social media world, was spending a huge amount of time on social, learning, observing, creating, engaging, all of that stuff. And eventually, I suddenly started to see this change in me, my habits, the way that I was so quick to be short tempered with my partner, with my daughter. And after a while, my husband had to sit me down and said, "Look, this is not you. There's something's changed. What is this?" And at the time, I was also going through this creativity squeeze where I felt as though I couldn't do enough in order to be creative. I'd almost run out of energy. I'd run out of creativity, even if that's ever possible. But for me, it felt as though I had arrived at that point. And at almost like there's lots of intersections here. So at the same time, I noticed there was a call for TEDx speakers in my local town, and I thought, there's something here in what I'm experiencing, and it's different to the norm. It's different to the discourse that's happening. And I think what I'm going through is something that others will currently be going through, and more of us will be heading down that pathway in the next few years as social media explodes. And I have to do something about this. I have to be able to articulate what's going on inside me, because surely I can't be the other one. So it was almost this moment where I wanted to be able to analyze what I was going through, share that with others, and ask, am I the only one? And so out of that, and having done the TEDx, which for me was really emotional, actually. So if you watch back right at the very end, I don't think they quite capture it, but I almost burst into tears. But after having had that discourse, lots of people then started to approach me and say, gosh, that's exactly how I feel when I use my device, when I'm on social. I feel this sense of comparisonitis. I feel less than. I feel drained of energy. I feel as though I'm just on this hamster wheel of having to create content, and it feels so forced, and it's sucking the life force out of me. And that's not an uncommon conversation I've had since with many business owners, parents, and also young people as well. So I suppose answering your question is, why do I keep doing this? What drives me is because I feel as though more and more of us need to be having those open, fresh conversations and being brave enough together to step back from what the algorithms and the platforms have been designed to do, which is just take from us. There's enough of that, because there's so much joy, so much creativity, so much beauty that resides outside of the world of social. It isn't the be all and end all, but it often takes.
It is absolutely not.
It takes more. It takes brave people to be able to relish in the JOMO, the joy of missing out, and actually engaging, on a human to human level with Mother Nature, with oneself. And that's where the best stuff for me really lies, which you can then share back on social, but at your own pace, in your
If you
own
choose.
time. Exactly. If you choose, you don't have to. It's a whole other topic, oversharing. So yeah, that's where my story
Let's
began.
get into it. Let's get into the topic of oversharing.
It happens often. Amongst everyone, though, I think people tend to think, oh, it's just young people who haven't developed that critical thinking, will often feel this need to simply just share everything, inadvertently or otherwise, whether that's a young person creating content for YouTube and is still wearing their school uniform with the badge on it, dictating where that school is, or whether it is this sense of needing to share every single emotion you are going through at that time. But it's not just young people. That's what I want to put out there. It's everyone. It's all of us, because I think it has to be down to this sense of always wanting more. So when we are consuming, if we think about the way that we look at, say, Instagram Reels or TikTok, all we ever do, because we're being sent the subtle nudges from the platform to swipe up, it has these little nudges where it literally moves the visual up and down as if to encourage you to continue swiping. Don't forget, keep going. And there is this constant need, consume, consume, consume. And I think there's, alongside that consumption and that visualizing others sharing, there comes this need to say, right, well, if I want to exist in this space, if I want to feel my worth, I too need to share. And so after you've shared perhaps what you think is a good place to start, you suddenly start thinking, right, well, where else can I draw material from? Right, fine, I'll start sharing X, Y, and Z, whether that's your emotional status, whether that's your relationship details, whatever that might be. But sometimes it teeters over into the oversharing. Of course, everybody can create boundaries. I'm not saying don't create boundaries, but it can teeter beyond.
And it has a cost, doesn't it? When we mine our lives for content, it has a cost to us. And we get into this, if it hasn't been recorded and shared, then, it's the tree falling in the woods. Did it make any noise? If you haven't somehow publicly shared your emotion, your breakfast, your, wins, etc., do they count? And the answer is, of course, they count. And getting away from the constant sharing, getting away from the production of what is, in effect, the content that keeps the product on the platforms. And the product is the eyeballs of the people consuming. And usually, often, that's every single one of us. I know, I've had, hands up, I have been 2.5 years ago, I launched my Loud and Clear program. And I did all the things, not all of them, but so many things on Instagram and on Facebook. It was a great success. It was my first time launching my brand voice and messaging program, which I stand by and love, and have had almost 40 people come through. And I'm super proud of that. And I remember at the end of that process, being so amped up all the way through as I was creating the workshops and doing the multi-day launches and all of that stuff, showing up on social media, keeping people up to date on everything that's going on. And it was intoxicating. It was exhilarating to have so much feedback from an audience that was growing organically. And I had, I think, almost 500 people in that launch, purely organically through me showing up on social media and other people talking about it. And then was time to deliver the program, which I was thrilled to deliver and adored delivering to those people. And I was really exhausted. And when the time came for the next launch, I didn't have quite as much juice because there was stuff going on in my family. And then the next launch, I canceled. And the launch after that, I'm not going to do. And the launch after that, I decided to try something completely different, which didn't work because I didn't put the right, I didn't promote it early enough. And this is for me, I'm a marketing professional. I know how to do these things, but my exhaustion from the life things that were going on, which were huge, but also the amount of energy expended to keep my eyeballs trained on other people's stuff and to just consume, and to have some vague sense that maybe in this way I was connecting. There just wasn't anything left to be, there was no creativity left. And in fact, this podcast, as we're recording it, is the first time in those 2.5 years, almost, exactly 2.5 years, it was January of 21. This is the first time that I'm feeling so excited to do all of the marketing that I am delighted to do around these conversations, because every conversation I've recorded so far has been so rich. And I know this one will be as well. It already is. I'm thrilled and proud and delighted and excited to share about it. But when I was feeling like I should, it's like you should go to work when you're sick. You should. I just didn't have it in the tank because my life with 2 teenagers and more mammals than is reasonable unless you own a farm and, a house and the pandemic and all the things called and were far more pressing than creating content for the little phone, which despite it all, I had in my hand all the time and was consuming stuff from all the time. It sapped me. And so when you talk about, seeing those changes in you, it really, really resonates. And I'd like also to talk about, and please say if this isn't something that you feel comfortable talking about, but as someone who has had a very late in life diagnosis, well, very late because it was recent, I can hope it'll be in midlife diagnosis if I get to the age I'm hoping to get to. But, having had a very recent diagnosis of ADHD and understanding that I have a tendency in any case to be highly distracted. I'm a highly distractible person. I'm a very multi-layered thinking, mind going madly off in all directions. And it makes me so good at my job. It makes me so good at creating messaging, at supporting entrepreneurs to get clear on their message, because I have no emotional attachment to what they've got going on. And I can see super clearly, and we hit it out of the park every time. But the way that these platforms are constructed is actually quite dangerous for someone who fundamentally has the propensity to be super distractible and to be lacking dopamine, and so looking for the little hits. And they have hundreds, if not thousands, of neuroscientists working for these different apps to keep us on the phone. So it's not a failing of our willpower or intelligence or lack of awareness. It's that the whole thing is structured to suck in neurotypical people, and people with ADHD, I think, are so vulnerable to losing themselves even more. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. And you're right. They've been constructed purposefully in that way to grab our attention, our eyeballs, because after all, that's what they can then sell on to advertisers. And they're then also mining our data. We are the product. You mentioned that before. We seem to be consuming and purchasing, but actually we are the real product when it comes to social channels. And so at that point, we are this, it can feel as though we are this sort of like trapped animal within this rather bizarre attention-seeking, drawing circus that we seem to be all drawn to. So you're right, it isn't our fault at all. And I think it's the work that I do and the conversations that emanate from that are all about recognizing that this is happening to us. And we have a choice to be able to start saying no to that and putting in boundaries as well. Because, it can be a space that is immensely fulfilling. You talked about it when you were discussing your first launch and the connections, which we're going to talk about, whether it's their connections or connections, big ones or little ones. But, it can be so fulfilling, but it's that self-recognition of the change in emotional status and attention status and creativity that we have to become hyper aware of so that we can better protect our mental well-being whilst also simultaneously nurturing our creativity. So, and that's why I think there's the more conversations that we have like this, Anne, are so powerful, because there'll be lots of people who listen to this and say, yeah, I recognize myself in that, but I'm scared of not being present all the time, or I'm worried, what if I don't produce enough content according to air quotes what is needed or what I should be doing, which is why these sorts of conversations hopefully allow your listeners to recognize themselves in it, but also in part give them permission to start setting their own rules. The channels will always be there in some fashion or guise. But what we must never take for granted, and you and I can testify to this, is our mental health, is our physical health. Without that, we are nothing. The rest of the stuff's meaningless.
Yeah.
So it's time that we prioritize.
Sorry, we have a little lag. Sorry.
Sorry.
We have a little lag. Yeah, no, it's okay. So just for the editor, for the producer, why don't you start again with it's time that we prioritize?
So it's time that we prioritize.
Yeah. It's so important to prioritize ourselves, and as someone is listening and thinking, yeah, actually, I'm a founder. I have a business. It's going however well it's going. And I feel like I need to be producing all the time to stay relevant, to stay on people's feeds. At the moment, I'm seeing a lot on Instagram, people posting and saying, my followers have been saying that they're not seeing my content on their feed. Can you please comment on this to boost the post so that Instagram will start showing my stuff again? And whether it's Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever the platform is, the game is rigged and constantly changing. And
Always.
To try to keep up to it is incredibly exhausting, and it's a losing game. So as someone is listening and thinking, yeah, you know what, I've fallen out of love, and hands up, absolutely, fallen out of love with creating all of the content to pour into social media and waiting to see what the results are, and then feeling the disappointment or feeling the elation if it does fly, and then wanting more of that elation, and then the disappointment that comes if it doesn't, because it's so random, right? What would you say to someone who is a founder who wants to grow their business, who they know that what they offer works because they've sold it lots and lots of times, but things have shifted and people's attention is getting more fragile and short. So our audience isn't consuming in the same way. We're all exhausted as producers. We're all exhausted as consumers. What would you say to someone who's thinking, yeah, but I built an online business and I need this to support my family or my life or my collection of mammals or whatever it is that they have in their world? What can they do?
I hear you. I'm in a similar situation, right? I run two companies, and what I earn from those businesses is super important to the well-being and to the the functioning of my family from a materialistic point of view. So I get that. The first thing I'd probably say is don't try to keep pace, because like you rightly said, Anne, you are never going to outrun the algorithms. They are constantly changing, like you say, they are forever introducing new features. I love the fact that Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, often comes on, and I really like his content, genuinely do. He'll come on and talk about some of those new features that are being launched. That's great, and that I understand the element of transparency that they're trying to offer as a platform. However, there will be many, many things that are going on in the background that they will never reveal to us. And so we will never have the whole picture. So instead of expending your energy trying to decipher what they're up to, what's coming next, I always think, just step back from that. That's not where I'm trying to compete. That's not where I want to put my energy. It's not worthwhile. It's not self-fulfilling. So instead, what I look to do is to do a couple of things. And that's, first of all, really understand both what I enjoy sharing with my audience and simultaneously what they perceive to be valuable. What will be of value to them? How am I fulfilling their lives? What am I adding to it? Have they got a challenge? Have they got desires? How is it that what I'm sharing helps to match that? But as soon as you start doing that, you start to build this connection with your community. And it's those little connections that really are truly the test of time, because those are the ones where you start conversing in the DMs. Those are the ones where you start arranging a coffee meeting. Those are the ones where they will call you up and want to do business with you or recommend you to somebody else. That takes time. I appreciate that. The second thing alongside that I would suggest is, when you're on a platform like Instagram, for instance, it has, I think at the last count, it had something like 5 or 6 different features. Being able to produce content regularly for all 6 features is a full-time job. You would have to be a social media manager. And even then, social media managers are not on all features, on all channels, everywhere, all times. Not the the most efficient ones won't be. So it is about prioritizing which channels you want to be on. And I always say, keep it ridiculously simple. I always say start off with 1 or 2. Do those for like 6 months. Analyze, take stock. Then decide whether or not you want to add another one to the mix. And if so, what does it add? What does it add to you? What does it add to your bottom line? What does it add to your audience? Or is it just the next door neighbours, dogs, cats, mums, milkman at the pub recommended you should be on a channel? Because often we can get caught up in the hype, can't we? Oh, you need to be on this. It's brilliant. It's X, it's Y. So keep it simple. And then I would also say, just pick 1 or 2 features within that given channel that you really enjoy creating content for. So I know when there was the algorithm change on Instagram, and then they said Instagram is no longer a photo sharing app. Suddenly loads of people who previously loved just putting up their photographs, still images that they'd kept, wonderfully and passionately curated and taken, were suddenly, it's almost as if they've been slapped in the face. It's like, oh, right, so you're telling me I'm no longer available, and I'm no longer welcome in this space. So if I would say that constant change, so don't change your strategy based on the fact that suddenly Instagram has, or any other channel suddenly has a whim and decides to change direction, because as it has done. Earlier this year, Adam Mosseri came on and apologised for having said that, and has said that photographs are still very much valid. And in fact, they are looking to prioritise photographs back in the feed. Don't try to, I would say, avoid any harsh pivots when it comes to sharing content in the given format that you enjoy. The more that you enjoy being in that space, and the more simple it is to do so, that's a more productive space to be in, both creatively and also for your own mental well-being. So don't try and keep up pace. Keep it simple, and be on the features that you enjoy most.
I love that, because there's such a broad availability of options, right? It's overwhelming, time consuming. If we look at, I have often said to my kids who say to me, but mom, you're on your phone all the time. I go, yeah, but that's for work. But is it really? Is it really for work when I'm checking in on the fitness person whose life I've been following since COVID in, on the West Coast of California, in California? Of course it's not work. And it's a really slippery slope that even those of us who are paying attention can get on, because we can't pay attention every single second of every single minute. And these platforms are made to draw us in. And it's a very human thing, particularly when you are neurodivergent, particularly when you have ADHD, to be seeking the dopamine and seeking the highs. And, some people with ADHD seek really high highs, like our skydivers, literally, and jumping out of, whatever hang gliding and waterfall jumping and whatever all the things are that often come from this need to have dopamine. So on that scale, social media is perhaps more tame, but it's far more insidious. And it has such an impact on relationships. Certainly I can see, even just in our house, in myself, in my kids. And, I'm going to link to your TED Talk because I think it's a really important thing for us all to reflect on, and that our relationship with our device and with the social platforms that we choose to load on it is very different. I noticed that, found myself saying a lot recently, and this is despite being a professional marketer. I work with founders on messaging and brand voice, and that is absolutely my golden area. It's where I'm the best, and I love it, and it's so much fun. The last 2 clients that I've worked with, and one of them is quite a large client, are people I've met at co-working. And we sit down and work together physically. And tomorrow, at time of recording, I'm going to meet this client, having just seen her. It's Monday. On Friday, I saw her for a 3-hour session. And the ability to be in space with people and to do this work with people physically, it is so delightful to me, Rubbi. And that it didn't come from social media, and that it didn't come from, however many launches. I have loved every single client I have worked with online, and I will continue to do this work because it allows me to reach people that I wouldn't otherwise. I have a client who's in the Shetland Islands. I'm in Geneva. Like, there's no way I could have reached Karen way up there, up north. And I adore it, and I love working online. However, there is this reality that I'm coming to. It's like I'm waking up from a stupor of, I love being in space with people. And you have a very strong being in space piece of the work that you do, because you mentioned you have 2 businesses. You also have a social enterprise where you work with young people to help them learn coding and robotics and filmmaking. And you also have a really strong message and amount of content around minding their mental health and being in control of how they use social media instead of the other way around. Can you talk to us a little bit about that work that you do in person with actual humans?
I too, like you, Anne, get a real rush from actually having that human to human connection. I think it's so valuable, which is why when me and my business partner for my social enterprise, Skills for All, when we are working with young people, and we're talking from age 4 up to 18, whenever we're teaching them, be that robotics or coding or filmmaking, it is always about understanding, how do you bring yourself to what you are doing as a human being? How do you look to create, but also do so not in isolation, but with others? So for an example of that would be, we have a holiday club. We have a number of holiday clubs throughout the academic year. So we're just currently in planning mode for the summer stuff. And one of the things that we've been very mindful of when creating the structure for the days is that it's well balanced. So the mornings are very much tech-led. You've got your iPad, you've got your robots, you've got your green screens, you've got your stop animation. There's loads of stuff that we're doing with them, empowering them with lots of digital skills. But the empowerment comes, we're using I suppose, the devices as a vehicle for them to recognize that they have this beautiful talent within them. And that if they tap into that, they can hopefully recognize they have a place in the digital sector, which is burgeoning where we are in the north of England. So that's one side of it. It's that recognizing their self-worth, that self-talent, and knowing that there is a valid place for them in society when they leave, school and enter employment. So that's one piece. But the second piece alongside that is also recognizing that whilst we may be creating with these devices during the morning, what's also extremely important is that we have time away from those devices, and that we look at one another in the eyeballs, and that we play, and that we have fun, and that we do it wherever we can. We always do it outside amongst Mother Nature. So it's about empowering teamship qualities, connection, communication, I suppose leadership skills as well, nurturing the older. I get very passionate about the social enterprise, Anne, but we've grown a little division of our social enterprise, and we call them the young digital leaders. So these are 13 to 17-year-old students who we've worked with firsthand on a number of projects throughout, over the years, and we've recognised that those students in particular have got something very special about them. Not just their, great at the tech side of things, but that they have this beautiful innate leadership element within them that they don't often recognise. This idea that they are able to inspire others around them, even though they may not be head boy or head girl or whatever designated leadership role they might be given. This is recognising that anybody can go out there and lead and inspire and encourage others to join in and come along on that journey. So we have grown these young digital leaders, this group, from 0 to 12, which is terrific. And those numbers might not be huge for others out there, but for us, and we've done that over the last 12 to 18 months in particular. But they're a vital part of what we do, and it's being able to have them start leading these human action interaction sessions with younger students, and again inspiring them, that peer-to-peer learning and inspiration that they offer is valuable. But we wouldn't be able to get to that space if we hadn't intentionally thought about the relationship that we want ourselves and the younger generation to be able to garner. And hopefully forevermore, there is this recognition that tech doesn't lead, but that it has a place in one's life, but it is only a portion of that. There are so many more fulfilling things that within that world of a human or a young person. But that's reading, whether there is jumping out of an aeroplane, whatever it might be, or whether it's simply sitting underneath a tree in a playground on a warm summer's afternoon where they're able to just breathe, do yoga, write a creative piece. It's all valid.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm noticing, maybe it's age, maybe it's having been in the online space for a decade, but I'm really noticing that I am tending to, I'm saying the same thing again, but feeling like I'm waking from a bit of a fog, where at the beginning I was so excited about all of these technologies and I was fully in the space. And I think because I was so grounded and present in my physical life, that it was an add-on, it was an expansion, it was a new frontier, it was something that was thrilling and exciting and potential filled. And over time, as that balance has perhaps shifted because of COVID, because of the pandemic, and we all did come online, it became our main channel of communication. And thank goodness we had it, because I can't think what that would have been like to all have been, quarantined in our homes, locked down for months and months and months and months and months and months, over 2 years, and not having had that opportunity to communicate with each other. That would have been a desperation beyond imagining. However, out the back, I hope, the back of that situation, I feel that the balance has shifted dramatically and dangerously, if I can say it that way, unhealthily, let's say. And it's, for many people, this online space that we're in, even as, for every person who's listening, and I love that you're listening, but you're not connected to the world around you as much as you would be if you weren't listening. And I love that we have this opportunity to have this conversation and that we can share it with the world. And I am also conscious that it's an opportunity for people to learn and to hear from us who wouldn't necessarily, but also another way of disconnecting from the physical space we're in, which may be rife with discomforts or challenges or just the regular things of life. But to be, as an example, I last year gifted myself the biggest dream of my life, which was to buy a horse. And I found this immense horse who wasn't in the best of shape and was very loved, but not particularly well trained, had lost lots of muscle. So we're not talking, I didn't buy myself a Grand Prix champion or anything, but bought myself this beautiful horse. And I noticed that there are days when I will be in the car and I'm driving along and I go to the barn, and it's always a bit of a rush because of aforementioned teens and home and life and other mammals to take care of. And I arrive, and it's usually about a 3-hour experience to get there and, prepare him and tack him up and ride him and then cool him off and clean the tack and put him away. And I'm very lucky to have this opportunity. It's a lifelong dream, and I'm so conscious of it. But I will notice that I'll be in the car listening to a podcast, and I'll just get out of the car, pop the headphone in my ear, and poodle along to the barn. And there will be times when I'm, he's a 700-kilo animal, and there I am with my little AirPod shoved in my ear. Probably my brain is paying more attention to what I'm listening to than, because it's really interesting, than this immense living being who is, I'm lucky enough to have agreed to a certain extent to be in this space with me. He doesn't really have a choice, but to be ridden by me and to interact with me. And sometimes I catch myself not honoring his existence by being fully present, because I'm really interested in what favorite podcaster ABC is saying. And there is a loss there, I feel. There is tremendous gain, but there is also a loss in not simply being with this great being I've dreamt of my whole life. And instead of being with him as my 12-year-old me would have been, just like, crying with joy every day, sometimes I'm not fully there. And I'm missing communication. He doesn't have headphones in his ears. He knows I do because he can hear it.
Yeah.
But it changes our connection.
It does. And you're not alone, Anne. I think we're all guilty of that. But like you say, it is that we get joy from listening to music or podcasts or online, audio books, and that's absolutely wonderful. But there is that, it's that conversation we all need to have with ourselves, right? In terms of recognizing where that digital device sits in our life. What priority are we willing to give it? Who's in control? Is it in control, or are we? And therefore then I suppose recognizing the fact that, right, okay, well, if I'm heading out to the shops, on the way there, I'll pop my headphones in. But on the way back, do you know what? I want to walk an alternative way. I'll walk along the canal towpath, or I'll walk through that park. But I'm going to do that without my headphones in, because I just want 5, 10, however long moments to myself. And I want to be able to connect with what's happening around me. It doesn't have to be a very woo-woo state. It just merely is you're being that bit more observant, that bit more present. And it's not just doing it for the sake of it, but also recognizing the effect that has on you, on your breathing, maybe on your posture, maybe on your mood, maybe on your thought pattern. I often have on Instagram, I have the little timer that pops up that you can set for different notification levels. I have mine set at 10 minutes, always do. And it still astounds me to this day when I receive that little notification, right, your time limit is up, you spent 10 minutes, it's wise to sort of like move on, or do you want to stay on? 9 times out of 10, I will now always move off that channel. But before I do that, I have this little mental moment where I do this almost very quick body scan to think, right, I've watched 10 minutes of reels or whatever it might have been. It inevitably is reels, where this is passive consumption. And when I receive that notification, I just think, whoa, how is it? Quick mental check. How am I doing? My head feels full. It may well feel foggy, like you mentioned, Anne, before. Or I feel lethargic, or I feel my emotions are a little bit sad, and I don't know why, because I'm sure 10 minutes ago I was fairly happy, but now I feel this sense of disconcerting lack of self-worth. Where's that come from? And it's that recognition, right? It is that, hold on, this is what has stimulated that, and I don't want to be in that space. I know I need to move away. That doesn't mean I won't come back to that, later on in the day. But it's that self-recognition moment to think this I've consumed a lot, and I feel fine, or I've consumed a lot and I don't feel fine. Either way, I need out of this, and I need to just go and walk. I need to go and talk to somebody else. I need to do something else. I need to look out the window. I need to stroke my cat, whatever it might be, so that I do not fall down into this spiral that I know if I were to continue in this pattern for even for a week, if I were to ignore those messages, I would be in a completely different mental state and also creative state at the end of it, which is what I was feeling, if we, I suppose, go full circle, at that moment when I first recognized I needed to write that TED talk and share that with the world.
So is that something that we can do inside the apps, or is it an external app that you need to put on your phone?
It's within the app. I can say, if you want to pop it in the show notes, I can send some instructions to you, so you can pop that there. So if you're listening, you're interested, you can take a look. It's within your settings within Instagram, which I think is terrific. I mean, to be fair, they are doing possibly more than other platforms in order to help us have a much more healthier relationship with the channel, and they are doing what they can to recognise the fact that mental well-being is critical. But are they doing enough? We need another podcast for that, Anne. Short answer would be no.
We would need another podcast for that. We would need another podcast for that. And that is not excluded on this end, because I love having conversations with you, Rubbi. I could go on and on, but I'm conscious of your time. I'm grateful for you sharing all of that with us and giving us a chance to reflect, I think, without blame or shame. And it's one of the things that I love about your voice. We didn't get a chance to talk about your brand's voice, but I'd love to do that some other time. It's one of the things that I love about your voice, which is a comforting, clear-eyed, there are things we can do to be in control of how we use our time and how we interact with these platforms that have the potential to help us grow our businesses so much, but also it's a double-edged sword, and we just need to be careful where we are. So I will link to all the places that people can find you so that they can continue to hear your voice and perhaps even work with you to help themselves find a more even keel with how they work with social media. And I will look forward to receiving that instruction, because I'm going to be limiting my own time on Instagram.
Yeah.
So
let me know how you get on with that. Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much,
Thanks
Anne.
so much.
No, thank you.
It's been a joy. And for you listening, we do have a little bit of a time lag. So thank you so much for your patience with me interrupting Rubbi, which is never my intention. But it is sometimes the tech fairies are not playing ball. But I think this conversation is important enough to share anyway. And I hope that you do too. Bye for now.